This class is concerned with Honey and Mumford's learning styles theory. Now, Peter Honey and Alan Mumford developed their theory based on the work and ideas of Cobb and his experiential learning cycle. Cobb's work is the subject of separate videos on the course, and you should have come across those by now. Essentially, Cobb believed that we learn from our experiences, and we reflect on our experiences. We get a greater understanding from the reflection, which gives us learning. So we have an experience, we reflect on the experience, and we get a greater understanding as a consequence. And Honey and Mumford developed their theory based on this. They introduced 4 different types of learning styles which they believed individuals preferred. So there are 4 types of learning styles. They believe that individuals have different preferences and learning styles, and learning can be maximized once the individuals are aware of their preferred style. So in order to maximize the returns on learning, it's important for the individual to understand the type of learning style that best suits him or her. So it's important for us to work out what style of learning we prefer, because that's the one that will maximize our learning, maximize the returns on the time we spend. According to Honey and Mumford, knowing your learning style allows you to become efficient in identifying learning opportunities and in the way you learn. So if we know our learning style, then we become more efficient as learners. We identify learning opportunities and we seek these out because they give us a learning return. We understand more as a consequence. And we also engage in learning according to the way we want to learn. Effective learners who can easily grasp learning contents. So once we've identified the learning style, we become more effective as learners, and we can grasp the learning content more easily because it matches our learning style. Increase versatility and learn from different environments. Well, if we take the experiential approach, we learn from almost everything. We have experiences all the time, some at work, some at home, some during recreational activities. And we learn from these experiences. We reflect on the experiences. We think back over the experience and we work out connections. And from these connections, from what we've learned from the experiences, we carry it into the next time we face similar circumstances, and we draw on our experience. So we have greater versatility, we have greater opportunity to learn because we're constantly learning from our experiences. It provides opportunities to further develop yourself as you are capable of understanding yourself and the way you learn. Once we're aware that there are different learning styles, then we identify the one that suits us best and we apply it to the way we learn. So it's suited to us. It fits our personality, our requirements, and in that way we learn more effectively. Right, let's move to the 4 learning styles. 4 learning styles are activist. We'll explain these in much more detail in the rest of this session. Reflector, theorist, pragmatist. Now we're going to go through each of these. So let's start with the activist, and then we'll go on to reflector and so on. Let's start with the activist and see what that learning style involves. So these individuals like to take on new experiences. They're activists. They like new experiences. They prefer doing things that are very practical. They are very practical people, in fact. They like practical work and practical experiences. They like to be challenged, and they like to be confronted by situations and solve practical issues. They're more active. Their learning is maximized when they can take on new experiences, problems and opportunities. They are constantly trying to solve problems and come up with solutions. They enjoy working in teams to reach the goals. They enjoy involvement with other people facing the same problem. So they're trying to work out between them what's the best solution and to learn from the experience. Activist learning is challenged when they have to sit in lectures, reading, writing, interpreting data, and completing individual tasks. These are not interesting to the activist. Sitting in lectures and reading and writing and interpreting data, that's not what they do. What they prefer to do is have experiences and try and learn from the experience. Try to problem solve based on that experience. So their preferred activities, well, problem solving, as I said earlier, working in groups and having discussions, role-playing solutions, trying to solve the solutions by trying to role-play, to try and get a deeper understanding of the situation, to try and experience it more fully. They're very competitive. Therefore, competitive activities are good to challenge this type of learner. They like to problem solve, they like to fix things, they're very practical, and they like to be competitive, they like to win. So working in groups, they like to show off, to show their abilities. So competitive situations brings the best out in them. Now the advantages and disadvantages of this type of learner. Well, first of all, the advantages. They're certainly willing to take risks. They're looking at the problem, it's a practical problem, they're going to experiment, they're going to try and solve it in different ways and come up with different solutions. Some of the solutions may be very, very focused on the problem, some of them may be wide and a bit more speculative. So they're prepared to take risks. They're very flexible about the approach to take. They see a problem and they're going to look at it from all different angles and consult each other and work in a team and discuss the situation. And when the problem is solved, of course, they're going to learn from the experience. So when they're confronted by the same circumstances in the future, they will remember how they did it in the past. But they're very flexible. They're going to look for solutions, and if their particular solution has been improved upon by another member of the team, they will adopt that. They're flexible. They're looking for the best solution. They want to maximize their learning out of the experience. They enjoy new challenges and situations. They don't like boredom. They don't like doing the same task over and over, because once it's completed, once the problem is solved, they like to move on to the next problem and try and solve it and think about it and discuss it and experiment with it, try out different solutions. They're more active. They're always optimistic. They're always trying to find a solution. It's very difficult to put them off. They don't get depressed or fed up. They're optimistic. They're always trying to get the solution, always working away, discussing situations and possibilities and trying to fix it. The disadvantages of this approach, well, they can get bored easily. If the experience is not challenging enough, or if it's one similar to one in the past, they will get bored, and that's bad. They're not motivated when they get bored. Sometimes they take action before they're properly prepared. So they don't read the instructions. They just jump in and they try and construct the situation, construct the article, the machine or the whatever it is. They try and construct it without consulting the manual. That's quite common. They just jump in. They don't properly have a plan. It's only when they've jumped in and failed will they sit back and become more reflective and think about how to go about it more methodically. Have a plan, read the manual, discuss with their colleagues, see what they've missed, and then try to work it more logical. But initially, at least, they tend to jump in if at all possible. To take risks, to do spend time looking at particular possibilities, even though they think the chance of that possibility being a success is very small. They will still try it out because they want to see if it works. They're experimenters. They want to have an understanding of the whole situation, so they will try different possibilities. So they will take risks. And they love attention. They like to fix whatever it is, and they like to show off what they've done, how they've fixed it and how it works. They like being given credit for it and being recognized as the people who have fixed it. They take too much responsibility sometimes. Sometimes the tasks they take on are too big. They're over-optimistic. They volunteer to take on big tasks which are really beyond them. But the difficulty is suppressing their enthusiasm. They're so enthusiastic, they're prepared to have a go at something very big. It's a big challenge, and they like the idea of succeeding with the big challenge to get even more status, more recognition, and they like it. They learn from it, but they can take on projects which are simply far too big. Now the second type of learner, well, these are reflectors. These people think before they take action. They're confronted by a problem. They want to think about what's the best way forward. They don't jump in. They tend to listen to other views and opinions before making their own judgment. When confronted by a problem, the reflectors will seek out other people's advice and speak to people who have had similar situations in the past and confronted similar situations in the past and perhaps have been successful, or people who have even failed in the past. Why did it fail and what they did do? So they're prepared to take on advice. They learn by observing groups and individuals. They learn by looking at how groups work and what are the strengths of the group and how did the group go about solving the problem, and who was dominant within the group and why was that person dominant, and what's the nature of the problem, what were the skill sets of the group and what are the skills necessary to fix the problem. They're much more reflective, much more thinking about the problem. Unlike, as I said earlier, the activists who tend to plunge in. Critical reflectors learn from their surroundings and reflect on what they have learned. They're constantly learning from their surroundings. They're constantly learning from the experiences they've had, good and bad experiences which have been successful and experiences which have failed. But they look at all of the experiences and reflect on what happened and try to learn from it. Their learning is affected when taking on a leader role or undertaking role play or group activity. So learning is achieved in different directions. It's solving the problem directly. It's a practical thing, solving a problem. But they also learn from working in the group. Who will be the leader of the group? What are the characteristics of the leader? Who's got those characteristics and how are the characteristics developed? They may role play the situation to try and see how they're going to go about it and try to get the work to the group to work effectively. How do they go about this? How will they deliver this? So reflectors are different to the activists. The reflectors are thinkers. They want to sit back and think about it before they do anything. The activity, well, the activities they tend to like are ones that involve observation. They look at situations and try to learn from what they see and from what they experience, but from what they see. They like feedback from others as a means to improve their self. So they're constantly looking for feedback and for criticism. Constructive criticism is very valuable. So they're looking for what other people saw in their activities that could be improved. So they're constantly and actively looking for feedback. They engage in interviewing and coaching activities. They want to interview people who have undertaken certain projects in the past, who have confronted certain issues. They want to interview them, get their experiences, and try and learn by thinking about what they've picked up, try and learn what is the best way forward. They tend to discuss things in small groups. They like forming small groups to discuss the issues. And perhaps the small groups meeting to a bigger group to feed back, to get an overall picture. Depends on the size of the project, of course, that they're confronting. If it's a small project, a small group may be sufficient. And they like to work as a small team, sharing experiences and ensuring that they have got clarity. They understand clearly what the task is and clearly what the solution is. They are keen to participate in self-development questionnaires. They're keen to measure themselves to see how well they're doing, or what could be improved, or how they could go about improving themselves. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of reflectors. Well, the advantages are they have good listening skills and gathering information. They're very good at making observations and listening and acquiring information. They take in the information and later on they process it and try and find solutions. But they're very good at picking up information. They can produce thorough and methodical information. They're very good at focusing in specifically on what's required. They can cut out all of the material that's not directly relevant. They can focus in very tightly on what they want to achieve. So they have a good sense of focus. And they will take risks, but the risks are calculated. They don't just take risks. They calculate the risk, and if the risk is too high, they may not undertake it. If the risk is tolerable in their estimation, they may go for it. So they will take risks, but it's calculated. The disadvantages of the reflectors. Well, it takes them longer to make a decision. Because they're reflecting and thinking about it, it takes longer than, say, the activists. The activists jumped in. The reflectors are thinking about it and processing the information and consulting and talking about it, and it takes longer to make a decision. The decision may be a better quality when it's made, but it takes longer. You could say they don't take enough risk. They're a bit conservative in that sense because they're looking for solutions that work, and they want to talk to people who have had experiences of similar situations in the past. They want to talk to their colleagues. They want to work out what's the best course of action. They're not prepared to take risks. They're not prepared just to try something. So that could be a disadvantage. They're not very assertive. They want to look at all the situations, and they're very accommodating towards each other's point of view. So getting a consensus and getting a single view that goes forward is sometimes very difficult. A small group meet and they all have different opinions, but they're quite nice to each other, so they don't argue about their positions. They look for consensus, but it takes a longer time for them to do so. They don't like taking the lead. They tend to work in groups. Their main interest is in solving the problem. It's learning from the issue and reflecting on it, and they don't necessarily want to take the lead. They're not dominant in that sense. The pleasure they get is in solving the problem and working collaboratively. Now let's look at the next type of learner. This is the so-called theorist. Well, these like to think, resolve problems using logical methods, and they can be perfectionists. They're very committed to theorizing. They're very committed to looking at problems and trying to resolve the problems. They like to think. They like to resolve the problems by thinking, by looking at theories and looking at methods, and they want it precise, and they don't like any ambiguity or vagueness. They want it done precisely. Theorists are further developed when they are placed into situations where they have to use their own skills and judgments. So taking a theorist, someone who is who's interested in general theories and has a wide education perhaps in the subject area, but putting them into a situation where they have to solve the problem practically can actually enhance their learning. It gives them a different experience, and it can improve them as people. They become more rounded as people. But they start as a theorist, they start by understanding the principles in general, and that's what they're primarily interested in. They prefer to be given aims and purposes in any type of situation. It helps them to reach their goals. They like to be told what the aim is. What's the purpose of this type of activity? Here's a problem. Here's a problem in the company, that the production system needs to be reorganized. Why does it need to be reorganized? Give them the aim. Tell them why. And then let them look at their various theories of organization, and let them look at the design of the company and the constraints that the company faces, and let them come up with ideas. That's the role of the theorist. But they like to know why they're doing it. What's the purpose? They don't like working in activities that involve emotions and feelings. They prefer to look at logical relationships. In terms of the company, it could be the production system, or it could be the network, the computer network. They like it to be precise. The computer network works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, there is a reason why, a logical reason why, and it needs to be fixed. And they know this in theory, then they can go and solve it in practice. But they don't like feelings and emotions. They don't like so much working with people, because that's too ambiguous. Their activities, well, they're always developing models and ideas. They're trying to look for general principles. This is the problem. The problem was caused by that. Therefore, every time we do that, there will be a problem. They're trying to develop models. They're using theories for implementing in practical situations. They're constantly looking for theories. They're looking for some way of generalizing, so that the company knows that if certain situations arise, the theory suggests that they do the following. So they like to have their general principles written down. And ideally they prefer to use data and statistics, because these are more reliable, these are more logical. And in general they try to rely on previous information to build up their stock of data, their insights, which they will use. So they're trying to build up theories and general understandings based on previous information, preferably using data and statistics. And they will use these to analyze practical problems when the company confronts them. Now let's turn to the advantages and disadvantages of the theorist. First of all, the advantages. Well, they think logically in any situation, and thinking logically is a good thing. They do exclude, as I said, feelings and emotions and the foibles of people, but they do think logically. So they try to solve the problem logically. They're good at asking questions to gain a better understanding of the situation, because they're thinking logically. They're thinking how the problem can be solved logically, so they will compose questions that will shed light on the problem, and it'll not just shed light, but it'll shed light efficiently on the problem. They're very rational and objective. They try not to have their opinions. They try to look at the situation and solve it as objectively as possible. The disadvantages, cannot think laterally. They don't think outside the box, as the expression goes. They try to solve the problem logically, looking at the situation. They don't look for innovative solutions. They don't speculate about solutions or try out different methods. Generally speaking, they prefer to work out the solution logically in advance. They don't think laterally. They can be uncertain about having to make decisions. They don't know what the solution is. They can be very reticent in taking on the problem. They want to make sure that they can research it, find the data, work out the relationships. They want to try and ensure that they can solve the problem. So they can be uncertain at the start. They can be very difficult to get them started to think about certain problems that perhaps the company is facing. And they don't like to be put into uncertain situations. They prefer where there is a certain logic that runs from start to end. What their job is to discern the logic, to work out the logic, and to get a logical model, one which works. And it'll work in every time those situations arise. They like to be the people who find the relationship, find the logical relationship, and write it down as almost a theory, so that the theorists can then say, well, our understanding of this problem is that when this happens, that will happen. And the reason why is this. There is the mechanism. This is what connects the problem to the outcome. And this is how it can be fixed. But they don't like uncertain situations. The pragmatist, being the last one, well, they like to try out new things. These individuals like to work with concepts that can be applied to the real world or to their job. So they like concepts, but they like ones that apply to the real world, to the world they live in, to the practical problems they face. But they like to try out new things. They like taking part in discussions, and they're practical people, but they like to take part in discussions. They like to talk about the theories. They like to understand the theories, but but essentially they're very practical people. They want to solve the problem. Learning is enhanced when they get a chance to try out new techniques and can see immediately the benefits to these. So they like new techniques, they like new ways of doing things, they like to see new pieces of technology or new methods employed, and they like to see the benefits that these bring, and they like to understand also the theory behind it, but essentially they are problem solvers. They want to solve the problem practically. Their understanding of the theory is secondary. They do like to understand it, but that's not their main focus. They need to see a benefit or reason to why they are doing a certain job or activity. They need to know why. They need to realize that the job that they're undertaking is important and why it's important and what are the advantages and what would be the outcome associated with their involvement in solving this problem. And it's a practical problem. They can't just work with theory. They need to show the theory working. They need to show the product at the end. They need to show the solution working. It's practical. So they're not people who can just work out theoretical relationships and solve problems. These people, they need to show a very practical result. The type of activities they get involved in is, well, they're applying learning to practice. They know quite a lot of theory and they're interested in the theory, but they want to apply it to practice. So they can indicate what their learning was about, and they can indicate how the learning was applied and how the learning solved the problem. They're very practical people using the theory as a foundation. They like case studies and real life scenarios. They like to indicate that this is what happened in the past, that was the solution that came out, and this is the reason why it came out in that way, and we're facing essentially the same situation now, so the case study can teach us how to go forward. It's very practical. They're looking at real life situations. They like problem solving. They like to be involved with a real problem and to try and solve it. And they enjoy group discussions. They like to have the group as a basis for discussion so that they can run ideas past them, they can talk about the theory, you can talk about the approaches to solving it, and it's a practical problem as well, so they can talk about the practical issues. The advantages and disadvantages of the pragmatist approach. Well, the advantages, they like to try out new things. They like new technologies, as I said. They like to show how they're able to apply the theory, and they like to show newness. They like innovation and change. But they're very practical and realistic individuals. They want to solve practical problems, and they don't develop ideas that are impractical or not realistic. They don't develop ideas that are outside of their scope or the scope of the organization. So they're very realistic about their approaches as to what can be done and what the organization can do. They get to the point. They're business-minded. What's the issue? What needs to be solved? How do we go about it? So they get to the point. They're not talking in the abstract. They are very direct to try and solve the problem. The disadvantages of this approach. Well, they cannot work with theory or basic concepts unless they can see the relevance of it. So they need to see the relevance of the theory or the basic concepts. They can be very impatient. They want solutions, they want them fairly fast. Practical solutions. And they're focused on completing the task. So the conclusion. Honey and Mumford suggests that each individual can be categorized into different personality types. The implication to the model: can individuals be labelled as activists, reflectors, theorists, or pragmatists? So there are 4 types, and according to this approach, which is mainly based on the Cobb learning cycle, but according to this approach, people can be categorized according to these 4 approaches. And it's probably particularly important in the context of business education, where we can look for these personality types within the organization, and these different types gives us an indication of the type of people we're working with and the approaches that they will adopt. That's all I'm going to do in this session. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.